Oh, got mic check. There's the mic. And good morning, everybody. It is Friday morning. Ooh, I'm a little low down here. Let me bump my chair up. Get back in frame correctly. There we go. All right. Good morning, everybody. So it is Friday morning, Firearms Friday, Friday the 13th, even. Whew. Well, this morning, I hate to say it, I'm gonna have to cut this one right at 8 o'clock because I've got some contracts today, and I've got this contract that I've been working doing surveys, right? I'm a drone pilot, right? That involves a license, so there's a bit more demand in that space than in kind of lower skill job. Drone pilot's high demand job. And I've got this contract that, frankly, it's an aggravating contract because they keep asking me to go, further and further out, and I keep telling them, this is the part that's aggravating. I keep telling them I don't want to go that far. It's too far to drive. It's a crazy amount of driving. I'm not going to do that unless you pay me double. This is the aggravating part. The fact is, I actually don't want to make the longer drive, but they keep agreeing to pay me double. Like, well, shit. Today, I'm going to drive to North Augusta. It's going to take about an hour. I'm going to knock out a contract there. And then I'm going to Riverdale. So for those of you who are familiar with Georgia, that's an insane amount of driving, right? I mean, I'm going to spend like 8 hours driving, 7 hours driving today to do 2 hours worth of work, right? But I told them, I don't want to do this amount of drive. This is too much. It's aggravating. I don't want to do it. And they said, we'll pay you double. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm going to make today what a burger flipper makes in a month, then I guess I can burn up my Audible because I'm gonna plow through probably most of a pretty good audiobook today. That said, let's get to the show. There's an interesting thing that's been going on, guys. Insofar as, okay, so this is Firearms Friday. And what we have done, what we were doing with Firearms Friday, and this will all make sense more in a minute. We'll just stick with me. Let me get through it. For the several years at the beginning, for 7 or 8 years at the beginning, the show on Firearms Friday would be, between 3 and 6 DGUs. That's a defensive gun use, right? A story where an armed citizen, a lawfully armed citizen, lawfully used their firearm in self-defense or defense of others' defense of property. And it was the case that it was relatively easy, to find, 8 or 10 such use cases every single week, and we'd cover those on Firearms Friday. And they still occur, but this is maybe the biggest problem with Donald Trump for this channel. The biggest problem with Donald Trump and the knock-on effects of his policies, kind of, an unintended consequence. If something I just didn't even think about when I first voted for Donald Trump. It didn't occur to me that an actual result would be that there's so much less crime that there just aren't enough national defensive gun use stories to cover in the volume that we used to when we first started doing that segment. In fact, the funny fact is, it's also the case that throughout that period, what we would do on Firearms Friday is, before I looked for DGUs, I would look at what's going on in court cases. what major new laws are going on, right? Like right now, there's a whole thing going on in Virginia where they're attempting to ban every gun that is not basically a revolver, a pump shotgun, or a bolt rifle. They're trying to categorize every semi-automatic weapon as an assault weapon and then ban it. Well, here's the thing though. We covered that 2 or 3 weeks ago. There's no new developments in that case right now, so there's no news to cover on that particular story. Similarly, more than half of all of the 50 states of the United States are now constitutional carry states. And frankly, the states that haven't already gone constitutional carry are your blue shitholes that are not likely to go that direction. There's still maybe 5 or 6 holdouts that could go the right direction and may in the future, and we'll cover those when they do. But the fact is that within the US, frankly, we're winning so substantially on the firearms argument, on the Second Amendment argument, that frankly, there's just not that much news to cover for a Firearms Friday segment in the way that we used to do it. Now, there are other things that we can do. I can keep doing Firearms Friday, and I intend to. And don't mistake me, because what we can do now is we can talk about the things that are going on in the world in the United States, and we can talk about use cases. Like we covered the shooting of Alex Preddy and the shooting of Renee Good. And okay, there's a firearm involved, a law enforcement officer, and we can Monday morning quarterback the dog shit out of that and talk about whether or not it was a good shoot. And we've already covered both of those, and both of those were not just good shoots. In both of those cases, you had what is painfully and obviously a good shoot, and anybody who says different is arguing in bad faith. Sergeant Major asks, could it be that Bondi is doing a good job? I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think it is that ICE is doing a good job despite Bondi. I think it is that more and more sheriffs are like Sheriff What's-His-Face in Florida, who will get out in front of the camera and say, hey, don't come into my county and break into houses, because the people here have guns, they like guns, and if you break into their homes, I'm encouraging them to use those guns because we would rather dispose of you than prosecute you. And 100%, I am all to the good on that. So where that leaves us for Firearms Fridays is we're going to look at cases like that. We're going to look at things where we can talk about what your rights, responsibilities, and expectations are if you encounter a situation. Say you're driving your car and you get surrounded by spiteful mutants who are demanding, I don't know, hybrid cars for trans goblins or something. At what point are you justified in leaning out the window and just firing off some shots? Is there a point at which you're justified in doing that? I think there is. The law might disagree, right? And under what circumstances do you just run people over not because you want to help win the midterms by taking some shitburgers out of the enemy voting pool, but because you're in legitimate fear of your own safety and you're not armed, right? You're not carrying a firearm. The only weapon you have is the car that the sociopathic, spiteful mutants are attempting to destroy while restricting your civil liberties. Right? No, never forget this. If you're surrounded by a mob on a public street and they're stopping you from moving, they are committing a crime. They're committing the same crime that Don Lemon committed, which is kidnapping and interfering with your civil liberties. Right? Okay. Let me be fair. Don Lemon did not commit the crime of kidnapping. What he committed was the crime of false imprisonment. It's not kidnapping until you forcibly move the person to another location. Now, if he and his mob had marched people out of the church, then it would be kidnapping. They just blocked people in the church. That's false imprisonment, not kidnapping. Fair play. So when they surround your car, that's false imprisonment. They are restricting your right to free movement, and that is a serious, serious crime. We talked about it on the show before. There's really only a handful of crimes that are automatically upgraded to federal crimes, right? Like murder, for example, is not automatically a federal crime. Murder is handled in the jurisdiction where it was committed. Generally, there are external factors that can be involved, that can be associated with a murder that convert it to a federal crime, federal offense, federal prosecution, investigation, etc. But arson and kidnapping, automatically feds, right? And now keep in mind, that means if you're sitting on a park bench and somebody comes to you with a gun and says, get in this van, it doesn't matter if the van leaves the area. You have been moved from one spot to another against your will. That is kidnapping by definition. And yes, it will be prosecuted almost identically to a situation where you're actually taken and driven to a whole nother place, obfuscated, and a ransom notice sent, and a ransom is negotiated. No. From the time you go from I am voluntarily at point A to I am voluntarily at point B, it is kidnapping. And it doesn't get worse legally from there. Once you go from voluntarily point A to involuntarily point B, everything after that is just resolving the initial kidnapping. Okay, that's a bit of a tangent. So this morning, and I've only got to keep running my mouth for another 20 minutes, and then, like I said, I've got to be on the road. Here's what I want to talk about a bit. We've got a drawdown in Minnesota. It feels like giving up. It does. It's optically blackpilling. I'll give you that. And I agree. I think this could have been handled much better. I do. And like, I watched Timcast last night, and Philip Auntie said, I think I'm the hardest line on this issue. My position is deport all of them and end all immigration for 10 years. No immigration, not even legal immigration. No immigration for 10 years. And let's get our house back in order. And he said, and I think I'm the hardest line on that issue. And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, if I had my way, what we would do is we would do that. But at the border, before deporting them, we would take all the illegals to the border, all the hostile foreign invaders to the border, and every one of them would be checked. And if the answer to the question, did you commit any other crime while you were in the United States? If the answer to that question is no, then you send them back across the border. And I don't care where they came from. I don't care. I don't care if they were Mexican, Venezuelan, South African, Djiboutian, Chinese. I do not care where they came. I don't care if they're British or Canadian, or even Canadian. If they're an illegal immigrant, they go to the southern border and they're expelled into Mexico. Now, that is if the answer to the question, did you commit any other crimes while you were in this country, is no. If you were a hostile foreign invader and you committed other crimes, and notice I did not say violent crimes. I mean any crimes. If you're a hostile foreign invader that came into my country and then committed other crimes, I don't care if you were a child trafficker, or a check floater, or you just broke the speed limit a couple of times and got some speeding tickets as a hostile foreign invader. Execution. Kill them at the border. Make a nice big pile of bodies. Because the world needs the message. We are done fucking around with your refuse. We are done being the trash, the landfill for the trash of the world. We're done with it. And what do you do with trash? You put it in a pile and burn it. Right? That's where we should be. Now, all that said, yes, the drawdown in Minnesota does feel a little defeated. Sergeant Major asks, so are you saying the FBI should be involved in a kidnapping from the very beginning? If so, why did the Pima County Sheriff wait 36 to 48 hours to get the FBI involved? That is a good question. So I have not been following the Guthrie kidnapping story, Sergeant Major, because there hasn't been much development on it. It's one of those, women love it because there's this whole mystery thing going on there, but I need some information. There's nothing there. There's nothing there to learn right now. It's, as far as a news item goes, it's just a sensationalized story. I'm not saying it's not an awful story. I'm not saying that, we don't hope that everything resolves well, but yes, the FBI should have been involved. Back that up. I think, like I said, I haven't followed the story closely, but if I understand the details correctly, that first 36 to 48 hours, it was a missing persons case, not a kidnapping case. Right? So it may be that the FBI got involved when they did, because that was the point at which the case got upgraded through the investigation from a missing person to a kidnapping. Right? Does that make sense? Santa Steve says, until there's a ransom note, there's no evidence of a kidnapping. That is not true generally. There is plenty of other evidence that can serve as evidence of a kidnapping. And in this case, if I understand correct, in the Guthrie case, if I understand correctly, there is a ring camera video of men in masks approaching the front door and then destroying the camera, which that is not proof of a kidnapping, but it is evidence, and it is certainly sufficient evidence to change it from from a search party looking for a missing person to investigating whether or not that person was kidnapped. So yeah, the ransom note is not the first evidentiary hurdle to initiate a kidnapping investigation and prosecution. That's not correct. But back to Minnesota, because like I said, I have not closely followed and do not well know the details in the Guthrie case. I'm spitballing off of what little I've picked up. Uncle Steve says that's evidence of the FBI raiding your home. In fairness. But and again, this is speculation from what little information I know about the case, that there is a ring camera that shows men approaching the home wearing ski masks and destroying the camera. That may be the thing that converted it from a missing person to a kidnapping, right? So, yeah, if she had disappeared and an hour later there was a phone call and a ransom note, then 100% the legally, I'm not saying guaranteed, but legally the FBI should be involved right then and there. Sergeant Major says the door camera didn't come out for over a week. It didn't come out in the public for over a week. That doesn't mean that they didn't have it, 4 or 5 days before it was put out. There was the case we covered, I don't know, 3-4 months ago, the DoorDash chick that said she was sexually assaulted, and took a video of the guy asleep on his couch with his pants around his ankles. And we talked about that one. And it was weird that the guy's passed out on his couch with his pants around his ankles and the front door wide open. But apparently, that case is in court now. I don't know if there's been a verdict yet, but it's not looking good for her. Apparently, he had a Ring camera that showed her pushing the door open, and that video, like, we were told by the investigators and by the reporters that video exists and that the police have it as part of their investigation, but it was never released because once the cops got their hands on it, they retained it as evidence and prevented it from being released, which I think is fucking stupid. I understand the importance of keeping certain evidence confidential in certain types of cases. This does not seem like one of those. That did not seem like one of those cases where that made sense. But my point being, it's quite possible that the FBI got their hands on that Ring footage, or the sheriff's department got their hands on that Ring footage, immediately forwarded it to the FBI, and then it was a week before they decided, well, we can release this to the public, and it might help us to do what have you, right? So anyway, Minnesota looks like a draw. The drawdown looks like giving up, and I got to say, in a way, I kind of feel like it is, because the Trump administration in Minnesota has just, I think they've committed a blunder on the PR front. Now, practically, it looks like what's happening is Homan has gotten the state and city governments in Minnesota to agree, as the law requires, to respond to ICE detainers. And when they have an illegal alien in their prisons, they're supposed to turn that illegal alien over to ICE for deportation. And that's been the crux of this issue. The whole reason that the surge happened to begin with was because Minnesota was actively aiding and abetting. They were protecting not just hostile foreign aliens, but violent, repeat offender criminal hostile foreign aliens. They were keeping the murderers, the rapists, the aggravated sodomists. They were keeping those guys in their prisons, feeding them on your tax dollars, and refusing to allow the federal government to deport these aliens. Right? And again, if I had my way, we would take them to the border and just build a wall from their corpses. And yes, Coder Girl, I agree. The whole reason that Minnesota made a big deal out of this was to cover up fraud in Minnesota, because the more we learn about the fraud that occurred in Minnesota, the more it is absolutely clear that Tim Walz was not only he wasn't just aiding and abetting, he was actively complicit. I cannot state that for an immutable fact, but the evidence available to this point, there's a lot of smoke there for there to be no fire. It looks very much like he was actively involved in it, and now we have more documentation out from some of the internet sleuth autists out there, proving that China was absolutely funding the activists, the agitators, the the compensated anarchists and agents provocateur in Minnesota. That was all being funded by various NGOs, and that does include the Chinese Communist Party actively funneling money in there. There were at least $60 million forwarded into those campaigns to create that activity. But the practical result, so this is where this is actually a win for national security, is that we are now taking busloads of criminals out of the prisons and deporting them. That is a great move in the right direction, right? I absolutely love that. But I got to say, guys, the Trump administration has been dog shit on PR this second term. A lot of that can be chalked up to Pam Bondi just being a dumb blonde that can't help but get in front of a camera and fuck it up. But a lot of it is missteps like this, right? They didn't have to publicly announce a drawdown. They should not have offered a win to the left. In fact, the correct PR maneuver would have been to pull ICE back to the prisons, keep the same number of agents there, and do the vans and buses full of criminals coming out of the prisons. That should have been. We should have had conservative influencers there with their iPhones or their freaking Red Ones or whatever camera, just live streaming constantly from every prison in Minnesota as the buses and vans were driving away. Have a couple of influencers do ride-alongs, right? Hell, I'd have been more than happy to go up there in my expedition and mount cameras all over it and follow them from the prison. Just drive and follow them. I could be talking to you guys full time, telling you what's going on, following the convoy as they take these criminals and load them up onto an airplane to go to send them out of the country. Or even better yet, I'd be thrilled to pick a random prison in Minnesota, show up in my expedition, cameras everywhere, and drive from Minnesota to Mexico, following the convoy, right, and documenting the journey, right, getting out of the truck every time they stop, so the criminals can take a pee break, and my old ass has to stop more often than they probably would, so I'd end up pulling over on the side of the road, getting out, do a little stretch, refill my coffee cup, and then breaking several speeding laws to catch back up to the convoy and keep telling the story. That's what should have happened for the PR campaign around this activity. You pull all the ICE agents back and you build you set up a freaking manned rotating patrol security perimeter around the prisons, and you start taking the criminals out. And brother, if I had my way on that, we'd be getting the largest dump truck that you could drive on public roads legally, pulling up to the prison, put every hostile foreign alien with a violent record, zip cuff their hands and their ankles together, pile them up in the back of that dump truck, drive them down to Mexico, stop right before the border, back up, turn around, back over the border, and just dump them out. That would have done it for me, baby. That would have done it for me. Because guess what the rest of the world sees? The rest of the world at that point sees, wow, I don't want to go out like that. No, you don't. And if we did it like that, Cade says cement truck. Yep, that's it. Keep them spinning and pooping them. Keep them spinning and poop them out the back like the turds they are. Oh, I'm gonna have to see if I can get the AI to make that video later today. I'll have a pretty long break in the middle of the day between driving. I'll see if I can't whip up something out of that on the iPad later. Whew. All right. Well, guys, it is just about 8:00. So here's your safety brief for today. Don't drive drunk. Don't fry bacon naked. Don't take any unnecessary risk. For fuck's sake, it is Friday the 13th. Tomorrow is Valentine's Day. So unless you are happily married, ladies and gentlemen, unless you are happily married, and unless you are making poor decisions and going to a place you just shouldn't be, I encourage you not to add to or subtract from the population over the weekend. Right? Drink responsibly. Don't forget your blank firing adapter before you go down range. Right? And if you're at the range with your battle buddy, stay in your lane. All right. You guys be safe out there. Thanks for watching this morning. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.